Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1002 just came out, and this was such an action-packed chapter. If you're interested in finding out what happened with the image finder position for my channel, then you can click the timestamp below and skip to the end of this video. But right now we're talking about chapter 1002 and basically breaking down all of the action that we saw within it, right? So I think the easiest way to do this is character by character, because every character basically had their own little highlight moments throughout the chapter. So starting with Kaido. Surprisingly, Kaido actually looked the worst out of everybody here in this chapter, in my opinion. I know he's obviously not the worst. Obviously, he's the #1 strongest character there, whatever, right? But this was basically the chapter where everybody got to basically flex against Kaido and show what they could do against Kaido. So naturally, he's going to look, you know, the most vulnerable, going to be kind of everybody's punching bag, at least for this chapter. We saw this all before with the scabbards, so this is nothing new. I think we're going to go through that cycle again. And then this time, to really up the stakes, I'm pretty sure Oda's going to have Kaido go into hybrid form pretty soon. Maybe next chapter or the chapter after or so, but at least around the corner basically, right? This was the chance for all of the supernovas to kind of show what they could do, get their hits in, look good, and then I do think that Kaido is going to up the ante pretty soon and actually take things very seriously and go through the transformation into the hybrid form and actually come out swinging, and then we're going to get to see some Kaido highlights and it'll just go back and forth like that, right? But this was not Kaido's chapter, right? This was the punching bag chapter. We did get to see him use his wind attack again. I definitely think that that seems like the least effective of all of his elemental attacks that he's showcased, you know, wind attacks, the Boro breath, basically the fire attack, and the lightning attack that he showcased against the scabbards, right? So wind attack seems the most tame, to me at least, out of these so far. But, you know, it's a nice little mix-up. We did see all of the supernova were pretty much unaffected by it. It was nice to see the supernova, you know, they had their own little ways of dealing with it. Kid just tanked it and didn't care. To him, it's all junk anyway. He'll just reassemble. It does nothing to him. Zorro casually, cold, samurai style, just knocks it away. It's a cutting attack. It's not going to be effective against Zorro. And then Luffy, he just zooms straight past it with his Gear 4 speed and comes in for a big hit, as Luffy would do. Nice to see Kong Rifle being used. I don't think we've seen that attack from Luffy so far. Luffy definitely had a pretty stellar chapter here again, back-to-back. He's had a few back-to-back-to-back stellar chapters of just looking really good against Kaido. But we'll get to Luffy in a minute. So, Kaido, mostly people's punching bag this chapter, starting with Luffy. Then after that, I believe the next up was Kid. Kid, I know that he hasn't seemed the most effective in this fight so far. I think a lot of people were a little bummed out that Kid did not have advanced armament hockey or anything like that. But I don't think that's a big deal. I do think that Kid is going to, you know, he is the least equipped, it seems like so far, to be able to damage Kaido from the inside like a lot of these other fighters are able to do. Or be like Luffy, who has that hockey that just allows him to straight up damage Kaido, right? So Kid is somewhere, he's caught awkwardly in the middle where I believe his abilities are clearly very powerful, but they're not the best for this situation. He doesn't have this perfect skill set. But at the same time, Oda has been building up the significance of Kid throughout this arc. Whatever we're seeing right now, I hope people don't jump to conclusions, because I do think that by the end of this fight, or at least by the end of this arc, right, whenever the finale with Kaido really comes to its climax, Kid is going to be getting in some big hits, and he is going to either develop or showcase some sort of skill that allows him to actually damage Kaido to a significant degree. Because right now we see the power is there, but it's just not that specific ability or skill is quite there. Because Kid, to me, it's very impressive that Kid actually took Kaido and, like, lifted him, swung him, and slammed him into the ground. I think that might not feel as impressive because Oda didn't devote like a full, you know, giant double page spread to it necessarily, or like a very large landscape sort of shot of that. But if you just think about that visual of Kid lifting the entire dragon form of Kaido, lifting him up, swinging him around, and slamming him to the ground, that's pretty impressive. It's just that at this point, we're kind of rating things more so by like, okay, did you actually deal damage to him, right? I think you could even say, based on Kaido's statement that, you know, I was surprised that you all were able to damage me, something along those lines he mentioned to the supernova. You could interpret that as like, oh, Kid's attack also damaged Kaido to a degree. I don't think that really makes sense. I don't think it really did. But definitely the other two supernova I'm about to talk about, Law and Killer, they definitely got their damage in on Kaido's insides. So Kid, I'd say hold on tight because, you know, just hang tight for a minute because Kid is going to get his significant moments. I think it is obviously very intentional by Oda that Kid at the moment is not capable of damaging Kaido. I don't think that that's going to be the case for the rest of Wano, necessarily. It might be the case for a little bit, but Kid is going to get his shine, I'm 100% sure of it, by the end of Wano. So Law is up next. Law finally busted out the Gamma Knife. I think we were all waiting on that last chapter, when instead Law opted to go with rocks for whatever reason, just throwing rocks at Kaido. Like, by far, you know, if you were to count up the things that, just list the things that are least likely to damage Kaido, rocks would be probably somewhere near the top of that list. Whereas, you know, Law's ace in the hole, the Gamma Knife, that's what we wanted to see last chapter, so it's really cool to see him bring that back into the picture and actually use that against Kaido here. I like that it damaged Kaido, and I also like the fact that, you know, Law got this attack in, but this is not like it was with Doflamingo, where with when Law damaged Doflamingo with Gamma Knife, that was nearly game over for Doflamingo, right? He obviously had to use internal surgery to get himself back into fighting shape, but that was nearly it for Doflamingo. The Gamma Knife basically almost one-hit KO'd him, close to, right? It got him towards that point, because that was Law's ultimate weapon. Doflamingo is nowhere near as strong as Kaido, and it shows here where Kaido is significantly affected by the Gamma Knife. He feels it, it hurts, but it's something that he can shrug off and basically be like, ah, you got me, but it's probably not going to work on him that many more times, you know? So good to know, kind of, just the fact that Oda's keeping in mind, basically like, yeah, all these supernova can come in and get their hits in on Kaido, but he is still in a league of his own in that sense among the fighters on their side, right? Like, what was once a one-hit KO attack for a character like Doflamingo, who Law really struggled to beat, that's more so just, you know, a dime a dozen attack against someone like Kaido. Like, it'll do some damage, but it's not gonna significantly lower his health bar. So just keeping that sort of threat level of Kaido up, that's good to see. Now, beyond that, we got the biggest surprise, by far the biggest surprise of the chapter for me, which was Killer. After last chapter, I did not expect Killer to have like a trick up his sleeve that would damage Kaido, and I'm still trying to kind of understand exactly what Killer did here, because maybe you guys can help me out in the comments. I didn't quite understand the move that he used here. When I initially saw the panel, I thought that his blades really extended or something like that, and he made them gigantic and cut through, like I took it very literally. I was like, how is he doing this? Then reading back again, and after seeing some comments, I think my interpretation is that it's some sort of a sonic sound-based attack or something, so it pierces Kaido in that way. But that still feels weird to me. Is it a wind-based sort of cutting attack, kind of like the ones that Zorro uses? But then why doesn't Zorro use something like that? Well, I guess he did later on this chat. Well, we'll get to Zorro in a second, right? Or however you interpret that attack. We'll get to Zorro in a second, right? But I don't get exactly what the basis of Killer's attack was here, so maybe one of you guys can clarify down in the comments below for me. But I was just happy to see that Killer was able to do that, because Killer, you know, just looking at that panel, that's a crazy amount of damage to Kaido. Like, arguably the most damage we saw this entire chapter to Kaido, and it came from Killer, who I think most people would put towards the bottom, if not the bottom of the totem pole among the supernovas that are lined up here. So really good to see that from Killer. I was a little worried about what his contributions to this battle would be based on what he did last chapter, or was not able to do, I suppose. But really cool to see that. Oda, look, if Oda's giving that much shine to Kid's number 2, I don't think we need to worry about what he's going to do for Kid. Because if Killer's doing stuff like that, then whatever Oda's going to have Kid do down the line is going to be pretty amazing. I have high hopes for Kid because I really like the character and I just want to see more of him. And I'm confident that Oda has not built him up for no reason. Lastly, before we get to Luffy and Big Mom, we have Zorro. Zorro is my one big... Look, we're gonna have to see how it goes. I'm not gonna like jump to conclusions or anything like that, but look, it's feeling more and more as though Zorro has just picked up a magic sword, you know, just a magic sword. That's just what it feels like. I know it's like technically not that, but that's what it feels like at the moment, that Zorro just picked up a magic sword that's gonna let him win fights that he otherwise wouldn't have a shot at being, you know, whatsoever capable of doing. Enma is, I know it's a controversial topic and everything like that. The initial explanation was, of course, that it draws out the haki from within you. So it's still coming, in theory, from within Zorro. But the further we've gone along... So right off the bat, I didn't necessarily like that. I understand some people did. There is the factor that Zorro is one of the few people ever to be able to control this sort of a blade. So that's props to him. But at the same time, it's a sword that's doing something very, very special that's allowing him to draw out more strength than he actually himself could. So from the start, that's, I guess, a bit of a controversial power-up for someone like Zorro. And then, you know, the last couple chapters, it's just been feeling more and more like, okay, how much of it is even Zorro at this point versus just like him having a magic sword? Because last chapter we had Zorro talking about, I need to draw out more of Enma's power. And then this chapter, Zorro's using an attack exclusively with Enma, and it's the first attack that looks like it can cut Kaido, coming from Zorro. And Kaido's worry is that it's got Odin's aura around it, right? So how much of it is Enma versus how much of it is Zorro? That's kind of the question. And I've seen people counter with things like, well, you know, Zorro's picked up special swords in the past before. What about Sandai Kitetsu? Isn't that like a special cursed blade? What about Shusui? And these things happen. That's true. Like, picking up an interesting sword is a cool little development for Zorro. I just think that there's a significant difference. Like, you can put it on a sliding scale. There's not that much controversy when Zorro picks up something like a Shusui, right? We can all understand that these things feel a little different. With something like Sandai Kitetsu, Shusui, it just feels like there's a difference between Zorro picking up a new sword that's, you know, somewhat better than the average sword. It's got its own, like, special flair to it or something like that. It gives Zorro a bit of a new edge in combat. Versus something like Enma, where it's like, how much has this boosted him automatically just by picking up this sword? Like, is it going to allow him to suddenly be able to cut a Yonko out of the blue? Right? It just feels very different. With Sandai Kitetsu, he picked that sword up, but ultimately, you know, when Zorro pulls off a feat like cutting steel or something like that, that's not because he's picked up a new, better sword, that's because he's improved with a swordsman. As a swordsman, right? When he picked up Shusui, like, it's not like he was suddenly magically able to do techniques he couldn't before, right? 108, you know, 108-pound cannon, that attack of his became stronger, that was commented on, but it's not like he needed to pick up that sword to suddenly be able to do attacks like that. Do you understand what I'm saying to a degree? Because what I'm seeing with Enma at the very least is that last chapter Zorro commented, the implication from Zorro's comments were that he couldn't do the level 2 haki that Luffy is busting out. That was the implication of the comments that Zorro had last chapter. That this was a skill that he didn't have. This chapter, it seems like, well, it looks like Zorro actually is going to be able to cut Kaido. Did he suddenly learn this skill? Or is it that he's specifically using a sword, Enma, that is just going to automatically allow him to bypass learning a skill like that and just be able to cut Kaido automatically? Right? Like, is Enma the only one of Zorro's swords that can cut Kaido because Enma's just a magic sword? Like, is he probably can't do it with Wado Ichimonji, probably can't do it with Sandai Kitetsu. It's just, at that point, is it just Enma's just this magic sword? Like, he doesn't need to learn this second level of advanced Ryo or whatever because he's just got Enma. He can just draw out more power from Enma, call out Odin's aura or whatever, you know? And I understand there's some ambiguity as to what exactly he's doing here. What does Kaido mean by Odin's aura? What does Zorro mean by saying draw out more of Enma's power? But you understand why it feels more and more as though the rationalization that this is just Zorro, like Enma pulling out more of Zorro's power. You understand why that feels more and more like a shaky rationalization as to what we're seeing here. So, I guess that was a very long tangent, and I guess that'll be the main discussion point in the comments from this video. But I just don't like this direction personally. My hope is still that either Oda will tone down how important Enma is to Zorro being able to do basic things like, you know, achieving the feat of cutting Kaido. Is it just going to be an Enma thing, or is Zorro actually going to be able to do this with all of his swords? Versus, you know, Zorro actually having to, you know, you get the point, right? So let's see if Oda either tones that down. My hope is that Zorro ultimately does not keep Enma permanently, and, you know, that Nidai Kitetsu, which has been, you know, like a little bit of a loose plot point throughout Wano, that comes back into the picture, and that actually becomes his third sword. But I've generally become more and more unhappy with the direction that Zorro has gone with the picking up of Enma and everything like that. So let's see how that goes. It's probably the main talking point of this chapter for you guys in the comments. I wonder what you guys will say below. Beyond that, Big Mom showed out this chapter. Big Mom was by far, you know, she was a one-man wrecking crew, essentially. Big Mom has yet to have a scratch from anyone in the series so far, outside of herself being vulnerable due to, you know, shaken up spirit or whatever. So yet to have a scratch from anyone so far. And then on top of that, you know, Kaido, at the very least, it seems like, you know, he's in his dragon form, he's not going full all out or anything like that, but he's been having his troubles with these little supernovas. But Big Mom, she just summons up a lightning storm that would put Enel to shame, honestly. Maybe that's going a little too far, but, well, actually, I don't know. And, like, going back to Skypiea, Okay, I'm not going to power scale Lightning at this point, but I will say that I think, at least going back to Skypiea from what we saw with NL, a lot of his more impressive Lightning examples were once he had the Arc Maxim going on. But I don't remember him summoning up, you know, just a giant lightning storm like Big Mom is doing right now, just offhand. I think it's really cool that Big Mom is bringing Lightning back into the picture like this, because I think Lightning has always been shown to be super effective in One Piece. You know, some series, they just have, they make certain things just super effective. Like, Lightning is a big deal in what, like, I'm not going to go into the details of it, but it does feel like Lightning's a big deal, and throwing out lightning attacks or having control over storms and stuff is a big deal in One Piece. So it's definitely cool to see Big Mom kind of just run over, like stampede over all of these supernovas pretty easily and efficiently with just some lightning attacks and everything like that. Obviously, she caught a lot of them off guard. They're focused on Kaido at the moment, but it's just a mountain to climb at the moment because they're giving everything they have to try and damage Kaido, and he's bouncing back from all of that. And they haven't even put a scratch on Big Mom, and she just has so much power at her disposal that she can just nearly wipe out all of them. Obviously not wipe out, but you know what I mean. Like, she can basically give them more than they can handle as well, just casually off on the sides. So definitely made it feel as though there's, you know, two big guns that they're up against. Both feel like extreme powerhouses right now. I think it's really good that Oda has not so far had Big Mom, you know, have like kind of a, I guess, a silly gag moment so far, because I think at this moment in time, that's not what's needed for her. I think it is much more effective to feel like there's two Yonko, two Kaido, two Emperor characters that they're up against at the moment, right? So I would prefer if Oda keeps this feeling up that there's like a 1A and 1B, not like the big boss and then the gag sidekick sort of, we got to deal with her too, right? So I definitely enjoyed what Big Mom showed us this chapter. We have yet to actually see Luffy go up against Big Mom in any sort of like significant combat situation so far. Luffy's definitely just been focused on Kaido for the most part. And Luffy at the end of this, you know, good to see. Invulnerable against lightning, gotta remember that. So we'll never have to see Luffy deal with lightning throughout the series. That's kind of funny considering how super effective lightning seems to be in the One Piece verse. And then Luffy just tanks. He just tanks the Boros Breath. Right, so it's kind of funny because initially when Kaido busted that attack out, you know, way back in chapter 900, maybe 921, 922, something like that. Initially when he busted that out, I was like, oh, that's Kaido's, maybe not his strongest attack, but probably one of them. And now at this point, it's like everybody easily deals with like Kinemon, Raizo, Zorro. Luffy doesn't even have to block it, like he just tanks it. Like Boros Breath is not a big deal at this point in time anymore, it looks like. So I'm interested in seeing like what the big moves Kaido has up his sleeve, but I think, you know, back when the Scabbards were blocking Boros Breaths and stuff like that, I think myself and a lot of people were maybe overreacting a little bit, being like, what, Kaido's strongest move is just being handled like that? It's like, no, there's probably a lot more to come from Kaido. It's cool to see that Luffy can just take an attack like that, an attack that we saw initially just blew off the peak of an entire mountain at the start of the Wano arc. Luffy just tanks it and comes right back at Kaido with a Gatling. There's not much to say about Luffy throughout these last few chapters. Luffy's just been great these last few chapters. Ever since he got to the rooftop till now, this has been, you know, some peak Luffy showing, both in terms of you know, his character under, you know, both in terms of his strength, but then also his character in the face of significant adversity or obstacles or challenges, whatever you want to say. So, great stuff from Luffy, nothing else to say there. So, all that being said, this was a very fun, very action-packed chapter. Definitely been enjoying the fight on the top of the rooftop so far. And, you know, let's wait and see exactly what's gonna happen next before making a claim as to whether or not, you know, Act 3 is going to end successfully for these guys, or if there's still some tragedy waiting for the protagonists around the corner. So, the Image Finders test. Thank you to everyone who took the Image Finders test. We had over 1,700 applicants, just under 1,000 people ended up taking the test in the end. So, thank you to everybody for, you know, being professional about it, following the instructions, setting aside an hour, 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours to apply for this position. Really do appreciate it. We are now at we're doing a second round, basically, to narrow down the final people who I will be giving an interview for. The reason we're doing the second round, and it's a second blitz round, so it's only 15 minutes, very quick, and it's only for a select group of people who we thought were really good from the first round. The reason I'm doing this is because we did catch some cheating from the first round. So normally I wouldn't have to do a second blitz round, but because there is a potential that some cheaters got through to this final group of candidates, we do have to do the second blitz round to just weed those out. Most cheaters I do think were found and caught and disqualified from the first round, because we were able to see a good amount of the activity and the pages that you visited and such while you were taking this test. But we do think that some people were, able to get away with it. So just in that case, we're doing a second blitz round. It's just 15 minutes. Please check your spam and your promotions tab in case you do not see this email in your inbox. Everybody should have their email for those of you who made it to the second round by this point. So check your spam and your promotions. Last time some people didn't check their promotions. But everybody who made it to the second round should basically have their emails for that. Don't feel bad if you didn't make it to the second round. It's a very small number of people who made it there. And there's just a lot of little things. So for the record, almost nobody was totally off with how they took the test. Most people were basically 90% good images, 95% good images. Really, the last candidates that we took were people who, one, had very good times, right? So relatively good times, but times weren't the only thing. Two, they had images that were really, really good. And I'm not going to go in depth into that here, but just small things like basically understanding a little intuitively of what I'm asking for, but then also understanding a little intuitively of what's going to look good in a video. So quick example being, the panel where I asked for, Iceberg's assassination, right? A panel regarding that. A lot of people gave me a really good panel, which was basically like, it was just a huge single panel, big text, that crazy manga bubble that shows like it's a loud voice, like Iceberg-san was assassinated. It was a text, something like that. That's a good panel for video because you can put it up front and people understand. Another good panel that people used for that was basically along the lines of, it showed Iceberg's face in the newspaper with a manga text next to it explaining like Iceberg-san was shot, etc. Right? So these things look good in videos, either they're big bold text or they're visual, stuff like that. When things are smaller, getting to smaller panels or more offhand comments, that's generally not as strong. And that's not the only thing, like that's not the only factor, but really almost everybody was really, really good with the images they selected. It usually just came down to very small things like, oh, I think this person was just like a little more creative or spent like a little bit more time finding a good image. And if you did that in a good amount of, like a good window of time as well, then that's really good. So don't worry too much if you didn't get into the second round. Most everybody was really good with the images they found. And it might have just been something really small, like this person who had a similar time to you just had a slightly better image or something like that for this point in time or something. So don't worry too much about that. There is the second round coming up, and then after that will be interviews, and then I'll have the person hopefully by the end of next week, and then you'll be getting regular content probably more frequently from me in the future. So that's all for the Image Finders test. Thanks for watching this video. I'll talk to you all later.